Australian poet John Leonard once said, "It takes a long time to grow an old friend." I certainly know what he's talking about, as I've known my oldest friend for 28 years. His name is Brandon Erkkila, and he is my guest for this episode of the podcast. Truth be told, he's actually one of the inspirations behind it, as he himself is a podcaster. He also has some great life stories to tell. So without further ado, let's chat it up. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Chat It Up. I am here with my very good friend, Brandon Erkkila Toes, Brandon Erkkila. I'm going to just call you Erks throughout the rest of the interview, if that's okay with you.
Think Erkkila Toes as well, as you are the only person to have ever called me that, but other people hear it and then it grows, so...
Well, maybe then I'll just call you Erkkila Toes for the rest of the podcast.
Yes.
So, you've probably known me as long as just about anybody on this earth. You're probably the only non-family member that has known me.
So I was thinking about that the other day. If I'm 33, I moved to Bluff Street when I was 4. That was the only house you've ever lived, correct?
We moved into my house on Edsel Street when I was like 1.5 or 1 year old.
So I was 4. We met shortly after. I was probably 5, so...
And I would have been 4 at that time.
So, yeah, 28 years?
Yeah, roughly. So like I said, you of non-family members, you've probably known me as long as anybody else.
Yeah.
So let's jump into that. Because we grew up together in Kingsford Heights, and so a lot of what we're probably going to be talking about today is a lot of nostalgia type stuff, just memories of growing up together. When I think of Kingsford Heights, the biggest thing that I think of is like just playing sports every day.
It is. I think of that, but now with being a parent, I also think about like... I don't know. Like, we would leave all day long. Yeah. We would leave all day long. Like, so Wickman's mom had the whistle. My mom had the scream. Your mom had a scream. And all we had to do was listen for that. And, I mean, we weren't going extravagantly far away or anything. You know, we weren't.
By today's standards, we were going
we were.
Far away.
I mean, but our parents had no clue where we were. They had no clue whose house we were in, what park we were in, what part of the woods we were in. They had no clue, and we would be gone in the summertime for, I mean, you know, you would eat breakfast with your parents, you would leave. If you had a lunch plan with your parents, you would do that, or then otherwise dinner time. And the only time we would get in trouble is if you could not hear your mom's yell around the time that you knew she was going to yell, then you were in huge trouble.
Right.
And you think about that now, just letting your kid go out for the entire day at 8 years old makes no sense. And this, oh man,
it's funny to look back on that, and it's not like we're even like that old. I mean, this is early 90s we're talking about here. I mean, it's not like we're talking about
it's not like the
70s.
40s, or even
But my biggest thing I remember is definitely that, being gone all day. But I just remember like getting up every morning, eating breakfast, grabbing my baseball mitt, and basically like knocking on Strelchek's door, running up to Galbraith's, knocking on their door, coming up and getting you.
The thing that I was thinking about too that blows me away is our Sandlot was K Cook's spare lot, and to me, you had like home plate, and then the rock that stuck halfway out of the ground by Strelchek's house was first base, and the divot towards the alley was second base. To me, it was hard to hit a home run there, in my mind. It was hard to me, it was just this big, endless field. And now you drive by now, and it honestly looks like you could hardly fit one house on it. Yeah.
Right?
But in our little minds, it was everything. Like, that became like Wrigley or Miller Park.
Yeah, to hit a home run across the alley was like, felt like you crushed like a 400-yard homer.
Yes.
And you go by there now, which now it's fenced in and it's full of apple trees and stuff, which is sad. But the size of it, you're like, you're just blown away.
Do you remember when the Tobins had that ramp for a little
X Game
while?
style? I don't know how I don't have a skull fracture.
I don't know. I remember one time getting up to the top and for some reason stalling and then falling off the side of it. And how I didn't end up dead. And Tobin's moved out of there. We were probably 6, 7 years old. 7-year-old kids going off of like a 6-foot ramp.
Yeah, it was like a 4-foot spine, like from the X Games that went straight up, and we would just fly our Huffy bikes off of it.
Yeah, and like our parents would see it and be like, cool.
Right. The other thing that I remember a lot about like growing up in the Heights was playing Piggy Wave Back over at, like, when we would congregate closer to your house, like near Derwinski's, and we would play that at night. But the crazy thing is I can't even remember what the rules were of Piggy Wave Back.
No.
I've tried to Google it, and
I remember it usually ended up with me trying to hide behind Alex Derwinski's house on that, like, insane...
Steep hill.
Yeah. And I'd be, like, hanging on to roots, and it'd be dark out, and I'd be getting bit by mosquitoes.
Yeah. And... I remember it being like a cross between like Kick the Can and like Tag. But I've tried to Google it and there's like no Piggy Wave Back. Like I don't know where we came up with that name or what that entailed. But that runs through my mind a lot. But again, think of that too. We weren't all that old out in the middle of the dark.
Yeah, yeah.
Being like, okay, like your mom would be like, well, I'll yell for you when it's time to come in.
Oh, I think that... I won't say the person's name, I guess, but like I remember the old gentleman that lived at the top of the hill by me, and I was so, for some reason, afraid of him, and I would still to this day sometimes I'll have nightmares of this guy, and it turns out now, just as a little kid, I had this weird, he would walk around the neighborhood and always wore the same clothes, and now you look back, he was just a single bachelor guy that lived into his 80s, harmless guy, just a little bit different. But, man, in my little childhood nightmares, I was scared. We'd have to walk by his house to get to the little store.
Sure. Yes, the little store, Westwood Quick Stop. That was actually one of the things that I had on like my list of like what I think about of our memories is like scrounging together like 10 centers and... going up to the little store to buy like 10-cent candies.
Oh, you would do mad chores for your parents just to get... And I remember like the amount of candy you could buy for $1 was outstanding. Like you could buy a good amount of candy for, say, $1. Everything was about getting to the little store, yeah. I remember for some reason Justin Wickman and I would always walk by their little automotive section and we used to want to buy motor oil just to say that we purchased our own motor oil. Not with ever owning anything that you would need motor oil for, but it was always like our adult dream to one day be able to buy motor oil, and now that's like the last thing you'd ever want to do.
Right. The other thing I find that's really funny is in this day and age with cell phones, I know maybe 1 or 2 phone numbers.
I still know everybody's phone number from growing up.
Yeah, I have literally down in like my notes about like talking with you. One of my notes is just 7749713.
4 corners backwards.
Yeah. Like that, your phone number growing up, I still have it like memorized to this day, which I think is hilarious.
I don't remember yours. 3853? No. No, I forgot it.
8552.
8552. Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
it's funny because you'll go to, like, anytime it's like, oh, who's your emergency contact? My own wife. Like, I'll put her number down. I'll be like, well, I don't even know 2 digits of her phone number. Right? And I've, been with her for 7, 8 years. So.
Right. Kind of circling back a little bit, talking about, like, sports. Like I said, just, like, playing baseball all the time or whatever. The other thing we played was like a lot of like street hockey.
I was just going to say, so one of my, and don't take this the wrong way, Joe and Lynn, your house never had like a bad smell. But you know how certain rooms, like the smell, the distinct smell of your basement will never leave my mind. And just the freedom I would feel of like leaving my house and going into your basement. And we had everything we would need down there. We had music. I have so many memories of your basement. Playing street hockey. I remember playing street hockey in your basement one time, and then I had to leave because I had a hockey tournament in Wausau. And I remember it was snowing out so hard, and my mom calling me like, yeah, they're not canceling the tournament. And you being like, man, I just don't think it's safe. And I remember thinking like, well, if a little kid doesn't think it's safe, this is going to be horrible. And it was. It was a horrible ride to Wausau. I remember you getting for Christmas one year this contraption. And this is, again, unfiltered thoughts of Brandon Erkkila. You getting this contraption and you being like, yeah, man, all you have to do is like get songs off of a computer and then it goes into this little machine and you clip it on your hip and you listen to it. And I thought, that's never going to catch on, Scott. That's a horrible gift. Like, you had like an original MP3 player.
I did. It was called the Rocket MP3 player. I don't know the company, but it was called a Rocket.
You got it for Christmas, and I thought, that goes to show that I should probably never be an investor, because I was like, this is so stupid.
It held 8 songs, I remember. It was all it could fit, was 8 songs.
And we would play Nintendo Olympics, and it was just a button mashing game to the point where you would have blisters on your thumbs.
I love that you brought up that story, though, about you leaving for, like, a hockey tournament in Wausau, because that's kind of the other half of, like, okay, when summer was over and we couldn't run around and just play, like, crazy kids all day, really the most that we kind of saw each other was through sports, because you were a grade ahead of me. So especially in hockey, we would see each other all the time.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of the memories that I have, like, growing up is traveling all over the UP for hockey tournaments. There's a lot of towns to this day in the UP where I could tell you how to get to the ice rink there, but that's about the only thing in that town that I know.
Munising. I can tell you how to get to the ice rink in Munising, and I can tell you how to get to whatever that restaurant, the Dog Patch.
Yeah.
Those are the only two things I can tell you about Munising, Michigan. And if you're from Munising, beautiful town, I believe.
It is beautiful, and I've been back quite a bit, but there's a lot of other, like, little towns that, like I said, like
Ontonagon. You remember how Ontonagon? Oh, and we just said it at the same time. The rink was only like, it wasn't even regulation size. So being a goaltender, that was the only place I took slap shots from the other net. Yeah, and that was for real.
Yeah. There's a lot of little ones. Like, it just, the last episode I interviewed Gina and we went to Ironwood. And the first thing I said to Patty when we pulled into Ironwood, I said, I could tell you how to get to the ice rink here, but that's about all that I remember from being in Ironwood.
And the only thing I'll ever remember about that is Sam Gerber, his junior year when I played for the Flivers, his entire family was from there, and he ended up fist fighting, like an actual fist fight, ejections, everything with his own cousin. And that was a beautiful moment in hockey.
Rest in peace, Sam.
Yes.
We miss you, buddy.
Yes.
That's a great story. But, and then it's like, okay, at least as far as you and I are concerned, like that transition kind of into high school, obviously we still played a lot of sports together all through high school, but then the majority of our time was spent basically like pounding the drag. I mean, it doesn't get any more Iron Mountain Kingsford than filling up your car full of gas and driving
Taco Bell to Sitco.
Yeah, from the north side Sitco down to Taco Bell and make the loop.
And like another thing too is like you think about girls, right? So we didn't have the ability, we're high school kids. You're chasing after girls, wanting to talk to girls. We didn't have internet. We didn't have, not like they do today. We didn't have cell phones. So like we would ride up next to other cars with girls and like wave and be like, hey, and then they would buzz off and you'd be so excited like, hey, she waved at me.
Right.
And now it's like, man, I mean, everybody knows everybody from every school because they all have phones.
And social media. I mean, back then the best we had was maybe like ICQ or MSN, and even that was in like the later days of...
Didn't you do that on Spigarelli's episode? What is it? Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Man.
The ICQ sound. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, like, I just... Vivid memories of cruising the drag, slamming crazy amounts of Mountain Dew, and listening to just burned CDs. Just tons of different mixes of like 90s rap and like newer rap, because this was like early 2000s, but then like punk rock and emo.
Yeah, because I was such an emo kid that I got you into a few of those bands, and then you would always transition me back to some of that rap stuff. And
yeah. And that's like the music is kind of what I remember most about that. We'll kind of circle back to the music here later on in the conversation, but let's just jump forward a little bit to college. Obviously, I went down to Central.
Yep.
You came up here to Northern Michigan University. And, you graduated a year before me.
Mm-hmm.
So you went to school for health education, correct? Yep. Like mother, like son.
Well, I started out to be a cop, and then I realized that I got a year into the program, and I realized that not only did I just didn't think it was for me, it was actually like a reactionary time thing. It's like your entire life. If anything like major happens on the spot, you freeze, and if you're a cop, that's not very good. Mm-mm. So I got out of that, and I didn't exactly know what I wanted to be, and it's like, man, like, my mom was. For all of you that know, and for all of you at the Kingsford, my mom was your sex ed teacher. My mom was my sex ed teacher, and I would always make jokes about that, and then I got that degree. So, so high school health, and then a minor in phy ed.
Right. So and you actually kind of fast forwarded through that. You're like, okay, well, that's what I went to school for, and I got my degree. But 2005 was really kind of like a big life-changing year for you.
And that's, being on your UP podcast, we've chatted up, I was kind of thinking, like, I'm really not, I know we ran into Spig today, and he's like, you're always a Youper, but I've been living in Appleton now since 2010, 8 years, and, I was thinking with all these other amazing guests, I was a little intimidated with all these other people from the UP, but I think one of my biggest things that I really wanted to bring to this show today was like the thanks that I have. I don't know if it would have been the same in other places, and I think it's kind of that Youper atmosphere. But 2005 was a different year. I was 20 years old, and I was going to Northern, and there was a professor there named Mohi Mohafi, and Mohi taught human nutrition, and he had been doing it for probably at that point 30 years, because my mother had him and failed. That was the only class she ever failed, and it became the only class I ever failed because it was very difficult. Mohi was from Egypt, I believe. And then one day he just said, this was probably late September, he said, hey, can you stay after class? And sure, and I met with him after class, and he said, do you have insurance? And I said, yeah. And he said, because you need to get a blood and a urine test done. You look jaundiced and you fall asleep in my class all the time. I was offended. I told him, that's none of your business. I don't like your class. And I actually said that to him because I said, I fall asleep in your class because I don't like your class. And, crazy. And a couple weeks went by, and I was lifting at the PEEF. And again, kind of hilarious yet embarrassing, but I was lifting with a buddy, and there happened to be some good-looking girls that we knew that were lifting as well. And to impress them, I tried to max my squat. So I maxed my squat, went home that night. Legs started to get sore, woke up in the morning, went to move my legs, and I was in a lot of pain, and I was stiff, and I reached down, and like where my leg meets my stomach, I had an egg sticking out. So I thought, okay, that is a hernia. Mm-hmm. So I called my mom, went to the hospital. After I was clinic, they said, no, it's not. It's a lymph node. You're just going to probably have a bad cold. Long story short, 3 weeks later, went back home to Iron Mountain right before my 21st birthday, and my mom knew that I wasn't getting answers and I was still sick, so brought me to a local doctor. I want to say it was Dr. Jim Batty, who delivered myself, maybe you as well.
He was my physician, but when my mom went into labor for some reason, he was gone or wasn't around. So I think Dr. Batty. I think it was Dr. Cook. It may have been at the time. I think
Dr. Batty delivered half our town. Great guy. But saw him, and he had said, "Hey, let's send you to." I went to leave because I didn't. Last thing I want to say is like, "Oh yeah, I don't want to drop my pants here. No one wants to." But I ended up deciding to tell him, "Yes, sometimes I have a little bit of discomfort down there." So checked me out, did an exam, didn't find anything. But it just so happened to be like, hey, why don't we get you an ultrasound? Got me an ultrasound. I remember the lady kind of shocked and, said, what's going on? And she was like, oh, I've never seen anything like this before. And the screen kind of looked like it was spotted like a cow. So they decided to biopsy, but they decided to wait. So they waited until right before Christmas 2005. Went to do the biopsy. I woke up, and instead of just doing a biopsy, they actually did quite a bit of work on my testicle, and it was mostly gone, and I couldn't believe it. And once again, they said, "Hey, we just really didn't know what it was, so we decided to take quite a bit to test. But probably just calcium deposits in a weird way." So 3 weeks later, I decided to go back up to Northern, and I started my new semester, and my mom had talked about how she was upset that they never told us what happened with that test. And it just, to me, I remember the last thing in the world that was wrong with me was I had cancer. There was no way I had cancer, so I didn't care, really. So I went back up to NMU, and I started, and a week later, and this is really weird, but I was in a class because of my health major, and I want to say it was called Death and Dying. And I got a phone call, and it was just, the history and the science that goes behind death and dying and coping mechanisms. And I got a phone call, and back then, a little flip phone, and it said a 920, and this was a night class, and I didn't answer it. And then they called back again and left a voicemail. And my sister was working in a factory as a chairman a supervisor in Green Bay, and around some pretty dangerous chemicals. So I thought, okay, something's wrong with Jenny. I'm an emergency contact. So when they called back again, I went out into the hallway and picked up, and they said, hey, this is Bellin Health. Brandon, who's around you right now? And I'd said, Gary Ebrecht. One of my professors walked by, and I said, well, my professor Gary is. And they were like, okay, you have cancer. You have less than 48 hours to come down here, and you're going to lose, your testicles, basically. I'd said, no, and I hung up the phone because I was like, no, like, this isn't happening, Wow. So yeah, but the big thing with this very long story I just dragged you through was the fact that I went to school the next day, and I said to Professor Bill Connors, and I don't know, Bill, where you are. Bill was older, and his wife Ruthie helped out, but my God, do I owe him my world. And I said to Bill, without getting too emotional, I said, I have cancer. I'm dropping out of school. I can't do this anymore, I'm going to have surgery and treatment and everything else. And he said, you're not dropping out of anything. And I was like, what the heck's wrong with this guy? And he goes, oh, you got cancer. That's fine. Just come back when you feel better. You're not dropping out of anything. And then, I had Gary Ebrecht, and I had Mary Jane Tremethick. I had Bill Connors, as I said, and his wife Ruthie. I had, Julie Rochester, all these wonderful professors that for the next year, they refused to let me drop out. And another thing Bill said is that you can go home and think about dying, or you can stay here and worry about tests and other things. And I credit that so much in the NMU community for rallying around me and what was going on, and did my surgeries, came back, was going to Mayo for treatment, because with how rare my cancer was, they really didn't know what my life expectancy was at that point. Yep. So yeah, it's called, they can't give you what's called false hope. So because of how rare mine was,
your official diagnosis, wasn't it sex cord stroma?
So it was stromal cell sex cord teratomas, and they were germ cell of nature. So basically at that point, I was the fifth person on medical record to have ever been diagnosed with it, and I was also, I believe at that point, the only one still living. Some of them were only found after an autopsy. They were growths that grew inwards, not outwards, so I didn't have like the normal bumps. And I signed my life away to Mayo, to kind of let them test me and put me in medical journals. And they were my mom, I'll never forget how mad my mom was, because when we got there, all the doctors were shaking my hand and acting like I was the coolest thing they've ever met, because they've read about this, but they've never met anyone that has had this, and this is amazing. And, they were so excited to meet me, but they really didn't know what my outcome was going to be. I was 21 at that point. I had just turned 21, and they had basically said, hey, you might not see 23. So, but fast forward to, now it's amazing, because I'm a very lucky guy. It wasn't what a lot of other people have to go through. There was some worrying. There were some spots that showed up. I'll never forget going to there in May of that year and going to the Mayo Clinic, and they said, hey, a PET scan has found a spot on your lungs. It might be metastasizing to your lungs. I said, okay, we're here. We've got our hotel. Let's biopsy my lungs. And they said, no, you're just going to go have a good summer. We want to watch it grow. So you're going to come back here in August, right before school starts.
Wow.
And we'll see. And I didn't sleep that entire summer. All I thought about that entire summer is that I was just screwed. But they wanted to watch it grow, and they wanted to see what it was going to do. And turns out it was I don't know if it was a result of treatment of some sort, but it didn't end up being cancer, and I got really lucky with that. So,
well,
it's
an amazing story, and it's one that I've heard you tell before. But I think my favorite part of the entire story, besides your professors at Northern being kick-ass and you kicking ass through the whole thing and coming out on the other side, is what spawned from your survivorship of this cancer.
Yeah, and it really transformed. I look back at my cancer, and the cancer helped me out a lot, because at that point I was like a lot of college students, but I was drinking a lot. I was getting drunk 4 or 5 nights a week. Waking up not knowing where I was, and people might think, oh, college, but at that point I was 21. It was getting out of control. And then with cancer, I obviously had to stop. You think you're invincible, and it taught me that you are not invincible. You actually might have, your time might be running out. But it also has really created to where I am today. I realized, you got to love the people that are around you. You have to take advantage of every situation. I'll never forget one time sitting in the Starbucks that was on campus, and it was the first nice day of spring that year, and I saw all the kids coming up the hill from the dorms, and they were smiling and they were laughing, and everybody was so excited because the snow was melting, and I snapped. I had an actual, that was, I would say, the only real time I could call a mental breakdown. I snapped and I started bawling, and I had a friend with me, and she was able to hug me, but I was so upset at the fact that no one, these kids were laughing so happy, and they didn't have to worry about dying. They didn't have to worry about, what's going to happen to me within the next year. But that, as sad as it seems, also made me realize how lucky I was to have the people that were around me and the support system, and to be where I was when this was happening. And then I was approached by Mr. Carl Fulcher, who ran the American Cancer Society in Marquette County, and they were doing the Relay for Life at NMU, and he'd said, hey, do you want to come and speak at our rally? And I had said, no, I'm not going to speak in front of people. And
sure.
I ended up kind of talking to some other folks and deciding, you know what, maybe I will share my story. And that turned into me being flown down by the American Cancer Society, where I was featured as a keynote speaker at Western University, Western Michigan University, Michigan State, Alma, Albion, Eastern, and I kind of did this Indiana, Purdue University, their UEPUE or whatever they call it in Indiana, did that as well. So it turned into me becoming a public speaker, and it turned into me being able to help people by letting them know kind of what someone with cancer is going through, how to help people that are going through cancer,
sure,
what to do for yourself. Don't be afraid to see a doctor. Don't be afraid to fight for your diagnosis if you don't feel that something's right. And then I think that segues into what I did after that, right?
It does, yeah. And you just brought up before we get to that, a really great point about fighting for your diagnosis when you don't feel that something's right, because you didn't really mention that. I think you kind of breezed past it in your story, where after your initial diagnosis about the lymph node thing, when you still weren't feeling right, didn't you go back and see them and they told you?
Yeah, and I held resentment. That's another thing too, without naming names. I held resentment against that doctor, and I'll never forget that man's name for years. I held resentment for years because he, at one point was like, you're fine. Stop thinking something's wrong with you. But I held a grudge for a while, but doctors are human. And now I work with doctors for a living, and I'm like, I don't know how they can do what they do. Doctors are human. They're just human beings. And they're trying to help you out. I had a very rare disease. It was not easy to diagnose.
Absolutely.
I didn't have telltale signs.
Mm-hmm.
So they did what they did from their end, and, I had to keep fighting, though, and just allowing people to know, I do not feel good. This is not normal.
Sure. So, as you were saying, a great transition from your public speaking and turning this negative event in your life in such an extreme positive, kind of transitioned you into your first job out of college, as the education coordinator for Alzheimer's Association of Wisconsin. Do you want to talk a little bit about that job and some of the cool stuff you got to do for that?
Yeah. So I out of college, I moved to Milwaukee, and I didn't know I graduated with this degree here, and it was wonderful. But I thought, when you have a college degree, everybody wants you, and then I found out right away no one really wanted me. So I freaked out, and it was I had told these fellas from Lawrence I was living with for my last semester I'd be out by January 21st. I graduated winter semester. I said I'd be out of your house by January 21st, and it was January 18th. I didn't have a job. I didn't know where to go. I had nowhere to live, and Mom wanted me to come back to Kingsford, and as much as I love Kingsford, I was like, I'm not going back to Kingsford. And then Jesse Carter, my college roommate, says, hey, I've got a room available down in downtown Milwaukee. If you want to live with me until you get on your feet, I'll help you out. He did, and I got a job in a nursing home because there was no teaching jobs really available, and got a job in a nursing home. Grandma had Alzheimer's in Iron Mountain, and Grandma had Alzheimer's for 10 years, and I really got to understand the disease a little bit. From there, ended up getting hired as the education director for the Central Wisconsin Alzheimer's Association or Greater Wisconsin Alzheimer's Association, and that transformed into me taking what I learned from Carl Fulcher and the American Cancer Society, and I studied Alzheimer's and dementias and rare dementias on my own. And then I would do keynote speeches for nursing homes, and I would help with behavioral symptoms, and I ended up teaching everything from secretaries to doctors, PAs, NPs, about dementias and rare dementias. And my biggest crowd, I want to say, was 830 people out in La Crosse at a convention, and I would do these 2-hour-long keynotes where I would speak about everything from Alzheimer's disease and symptoms, behaviors of people that have Alzheimer's disease, the breakdown of the brain, every lobe of the brain and where it goes. And then rare dementias was always my favorite, to talk about things like Lewy body dementia, Pick's disease, Creutzfeldt-Jakob, Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome was another. So, and even chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE, which is back even in 2010 when I was teaching about CTE, people really didn't know, and now CTE in the NFL is really sure. With this chronic traumatic encephalopathy that patients are feeling or football players are getting from head injury. So, did that, and it was wonderful, and that then turned into getting noticed by pharmaceutical companies for speaking abilities, and kind of transitioned into pharmaceutical sales and working for pharmaceutical companies, which is what I do now. But still on the side, I teach at NWTC and FVTC about dementia every once in a while, and then the Green Bay public school system has me come in, and they have a CNA program, and I am able to go in and teach their CNA high school juniors and seniors about dementia, Alzheimer's, and what they're going to see when they are doing their CNA certificates through the high school.
To me, that's just incredible in and of itself. I mean, now you're working in pharmaceutical sales, but you just keep giving back, and you keep helping educate people through your own personal experiences. And I've just always been continued to be blown away by all of that. Now, with the pharmaceutical sales stuff, your territory essentially is, even though technically you live down in Appleton, really it's fair to say that you work in the UP, because your territory is all the way through the UP.
I go through from Fond du Lac, Wisconsin's my furthest south, and then all the way up through the entire UP, and
So you're putting on major miles.
About 50,000 a year.
Yeah,
about 50,000 a year.
So you're driving all over the place. You're driving through the heart of God's country. What's some of the more interesting or funny or weird things that you've seen on your travels?
Oh man. Well, it's great to, now up here, having a camp kind of by Witch Lake, we had the regular animals, but now it's not that uncommon to see a moose in that area, especially around Koski Corners. So I love seeing that. I do find, so I have to wear a full suit for a living now. It's just, that's our attire. We wear a full suit. It's very old-fashioned like that. But I'll be honest, I go to some of these places in the UP, like you're in Newberry in a full suit, and people will be like, wow, you're some sort of banker? It's like, no, not a banker. I don't even think bankers dress like this anymore. I think bankers can probably wear khakis and a tucked-in shirt. But You notice when you're in smaller places, it's just a little bit more recognizable. Also, another thing I love about the UP is obviously having the last name Erkkila. It's Finnish, but, being in the UP and presenting my card at a desk. And that's the thing, is people really are much more friendly. Wisconsin's a great place to live. I love Appleton, but it's so much, I present my card here and all of a sudden it's like Erkkila, and then you get to hear about, the Erkkila they knew in Calumet back in 1983 that sold them their first car, and it's like, nope, not a Calumet Erkkila, I'm an Agani Erkkila, and it's a very small sect of Erkkilas. But I'm sure all the Calumet Erkkilas, including the one that sold you your car in 1983, were wonderful. But having that last name, I get asked a lot of questions about where I'm coming from and who I am and where I'm going. And I don't know. I think it's been great, too, just being able to, maybe because I'm eating on the company dime, but trying out some different restaurants up here that I never have. And I know, you and Spig really covered that as well. With some
there's
of these
a lot of
different
gems across the UP for sure.
And coming up here and staying with you on my work travels, lanyap tonight. I've never had lanyap. Lanyap was huge when I went to school here. I've never had it.
Yeah.
I think maybe I thought it was maybe just like all seafood or all Cajun. It was delicious. It was wonderful.
Yeah, that's definitely one of my favorite places in Marquette for sure.
Yeah.
So are you totally loving now that you can go 65 across the UP when you're going?
Isn't that's weird, especially going out towards like Manistee. You can is the Sini stretch 65 now?
I believe it is. Once you get on the other side of Munising, I think it is. I'm not 100% sure because I haven't been that way in a while, but I'm pretty sure that it is. I know going towards Ironwood it was, and it was magical. And I know that US2 all the way.
Oh, I didn't know that was.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We made it from here in Ishpeming. We made it to Bond Falls in like an hour and 27 minutes, and normally that's almost like a 2-hour drive or like an hour and 45. So
and that's 65 as well, huh?
Yeah, when you turn in Covington, when you hang a left in Covington to head that direction, that's where it turns to
I've got to admit, and to all of you up here, I love you guys, but you can see a Youper driving down on 41 by Appleton or Green Bay from 10 miles away, just because it's 70. 70s are a speed limit, and we go 70, 76 to 81 is usually, I keep it in that window and I'm fine. And you'll just see these white-knuckled, people just staring at the road. You can see them trembling. To give plenty of distance. I know you're getting some more, but down in Appleton, we have probably over 50 roundabouts, and you'll see somebody with a Michigan license plate going around a roundabout. Just give them space, give them time, and expect the unexpected.
We're getting better. Marquette's got a bunch now. So
but expect the unexpected. And it's kind of like they're just rolling the dice. They go into the roundabout and just whatever the end outcome is, it's the end outcome. So.
Oh, that's hilarious. So I want to transition to your podcast instead of just talking about my podcast. I said we would kind of come back to music because music has played a big part in our friendship and played a huge part in your life.
Yeah.
So now you have this podcast called the Agonizing Audio Hour. Why don't you tell the folks listening in what your podcast is all about? Well,
I've always been interested. I listen to a lot of podcasts with all of my window time and driving and and a lot of music, and I've never. The thing with you that's great is you're an endless amount of knowledge when it comes to music, movies, TV, all this stuff, especially movies and TV. But I never got into movies or TV much growing up. I've always been a big music guy, so I always knew I wanted to do something like that, and podcast wise. And I was coaching girls high school hockey for 4 years, and decided to walk away from that to focus on family, and I wanted something to kind of fill a little bit of time that I had all this free time now. And my buddy Jake and I got together, and we'd always wanted to do a podcast. We said, why don't we do one about music? So basically, we pick, and you were on our show last week, and it was absolutely wonderful, but we pick music for each other, and we take turns each week where I'll pick an album for him that's maybe questionable, maybe agonizing in itself, and he has to listen to it. But the agonizing part, what you found out, is you have to listen to this once a day for one full week.
Oh my God. When I was on with you guys, listening to one album
Yep.
only for an entire week
Mm-hmm.
was
Oh, it drives you insane. It drives you insane.
And it wasn't even that bad of an album. I've heard way worse.
Yeah.
And it was so hard to listen to only that for a week straight.
Yeah, and you want to talk about like going back to like coping mechanisms, and you know, you kind of find yourself with these where you have to cope with listening to an album once a day for a week straight. It becomes agonizing, and that's where it kind of comes from. So then we go on air and we break it down, and we break down you know, what our thoughts on every track, and we'll go into the history of it. So there's a little bit of comedy, but there's a lot of music history and a lot of music background, and hopefully folks, you know, learn a lot from listening to us. But it's crazy, you know, getting a following across not only the U.S., but, you know, we're doing a Katy Perry album this week, which, by the way, it's agonizing. But for some reason, like a Katy Perry fan club in Brazil found out about this. And we have, like, I don't know, we've had like 50 or quite a few new likes on our Facebook page and people following us, all from Brazil. So now we're getting a big, you know, fan base from there. But it's humbling and it's great. But having fans all over the U.S. now, and people that listen to our show religiously, and, you know, people like you as well. So coming on.
Well, and like I said, music has played a big part. Like I said, it's always kind of played a big part in your life.
Oh yeah.
I mean, one of the things that we didn't talk about that we very well could have. So I'm gonna just throw this out there now because I forgot what you had done that was so awesome. Is you went on tour with some bands all across the U.S.
I did, and now one of them is really famous, so it's amazing. But a buddy and I, back in 2007, so I had cancer. This was back in the MySpace days. Yeah, we forgot about this. You know, I just
yeah, I
would message bands and talk to them about stuff. And messaged a band down in Georgia, and they were new, and they were called Classic Addict, and they were going to go on a do-it-yourself tour, and my buddy and I were like, hey, if you need any help, you know, booking shows. So we helped them book an entire tour. We would cold call venues all across the U.S. You know, logistically, we knew nothing, and we set up this gigantic tour, and then they were like, hey, like, you know, why don't you come with? You can sell merch. You can be our tour managers. So we did that, and the lead singer of that band ended up moving to Nashville later on in life. Their band fell apart. You know, we were all just 20-year-old kids, 21-year-old kids.
Yeah.
And now, you know, his name is Cale Dodds, and he got into country music. And Cale is now out on tour with, you know, the likes of like Dierks Bentley. He was named this year as one of the top 3 CMA or CMT country artists to watch. His newest album has sold like crazy. I'll be walking through Home Depot with my wife, and all of a sudden Cale will come on the overhead singing his song. So, you know, go check out Cale Dodds, you guys, and check out his music and support him. But, you know, he's hitting it big time. And to have a friend and somebody that I lived in a 15-passenger Dodge van with him for 2 months straight, and now he's
darting around the U.S., showering at truck stops. And
we did, man. I'll never forget getting kicked out of a truck stop in Joplin, Missouri, because we paid the $10 to use the shower. But then, you know, sounds horrible, but when you're desperate, you're desperate. So we had 10 dudes like packed in this shower together, just trying to do our best to all get clean, and we got kicked out by the time like the third dude got clean. You know, at a Flying J truck stop in Joplin, Missouri. So, you know, sleeping in these motels where I was scared, but we were tired and we needed a place to sleep. So we would stop at these, you know, $20 an hour type hotels, you know, pay by the hour hotels, and we would stop and get some sleep at those places, and, you know, buying bread and meat and peanut butter and jelly and living off of that. And but it was the greatest time of my life. Like, you know, it was. And
how much you learned about music and the music industry.
Oh gosh, yeah. You know, thinking that's what I wanted to do, but also knowing that I needed health insurance because I was gonna have to, you know, always get checkups and such. So
right. So with your podcast, I mean, you are on what now? Episode 10 or 11?
Oh, 12.
12.
This will be 12, yeah.
So 12 weeks of doing this. So basically you're 3 months in.
Yeah.
I mean, can you talk a little bit about like some of the challenges that you've had with like getting the podcast up and going and that you've kind of seen along the way?
Well, I think it's like anything else. I think you run into maybe sometimes you think like it would be going a little bit better in areas, or, I mean, we're flying by the wire, just like you kind of did with this. I mean, you really didn't know anything about podcasts before doing this, and you're killing it. But, you know, sometimes we'll run into maybe some audio issues, and we need to kind of learn about that. You know, doing background, making sure that we're giving enough time to listen to the music. We're writing down notes and doing things on top of our full-time jobs to make sure that people are getting great content from us, and it's not boring, it's not the same.
Sure.
It's almost like you're writing a show, because you want to come up with new segments, bouncing ideas off of each other. Hey, how does this work? Or what do you think about trying this out for next week? And finding time, especially with, you know, having a wife and a child, and Jake, you know, having a live-in girlfriend there, and, you know, them allowing us to spend so much time kind of doing this is great. So,
sure.
You know, it's learning as you go.
Yeah.
Which I'd like to say you have been, but I don't think you have, because your podcast has been consistently great. Sounds great guests. That's why I've been nervous to come on here. But
no, you're number one. You've been a great guest, but I'm still learning as I go too. I feel like I've kind of had some growing pains along the way too, figuring things out, audio wise, making it sound as best as I can.
I think it's great because you are an author. You wrote this children's book. You blew everybody away. You sell all these copies, and everybody, including myself, and I think I'm the number one person that would always say to you, what? What would I always ask you? When are you going to what?
Write another book.
When are you going to write another book? And, you know, maybe that's just not, you know, your thing, but then instead of writing another book, you've got this. You've got hundreds of listeners per week or per episode. I mean, you know who I think you're turning into, and I didn't tell you this, and I didn't prompt you with this.
Oh,
and this goes back to childhood too.
I'm scared.
This goes back to childhood too, because when you go back to childhood, you think about the people that you looked up to. And this dude, I thought this guy was an actual celebrity. I thought this man was a celebrity. I thought this guy was a multi-millionaire. Buck Levasseur. And you look back, man. Buck Levasseur was just a regular dude with like a cable television, like a cable.
Discovering, man. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was just like it wasn't anything special. It was just, they were like, oh yeah, you want to use our studio and make a show, or here's a camera. I don't even know if he really made money off of that.
That I don't know.
Yeah, but to me, this man was like a world-class celebrity. And he was able to bring the entire UP kind of together and showed us things about the UP and the outdoors, and maybe things, you know, especially before the internet, maybe, like, you know, like you said, like Bond Falls or some of these other places you might not know about. But I think you're getting some status in the UP legend column.
I think you're being way
no.
too...
I think you're turning into one, which is a good thing.
I will say this about the book stuff, because from the minute I put Y is for Youper out, like literally at like my first book signing, people were asking me if I was going to do another one. Yeah. And you know, I could very easily, I shouldn't say easily, but if I sat down and put my mind and my energy towards it, I know that I could come up with another book. I've had a couple of different ideas for doing that. Yeah. But I don't want to necessarily like pigeonhole myself as like the guy that does the kids' Youper books.
Yeah.
And
make an adult Youper book.
Well, but you know what? Y is for Youper is just as much for adults as it is for kids.
Oh, no, it is.
Because the people that I know that read it to their kids and grandkids get just as much out of it as their grandkids do.
Oh, and Finn loves it.
Yeah, but I guess my point is at the end of the day, I mean, and you've known me my whole life, I've always kind of like, I don't want to say I'm all over the place, but I like to kind of explore different things and find out what I'm good at and what I'm not good at. Yeah. And
there's nothing wrong with that.
No. So, you know, yes, I had a lot of success with doing the Y is for Youper book, but my passion, or I should say my drive, has kind of been pulling me towards doing this podcast. Yeah. And I'm having an absolute blast doing it.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
A lot of that probably comes back to good old KHS being in digital video editing class with Jeff Harry. Shout out to Jeff Harry if you're listening into this.
Yeah. Oh man, that was. You look at. I don't know how many schools do that now, but shout out to Jeff Harry for sure, because that class I remember taking it and thinking, hey, like, this is so weird to have like a video like class at Kingsford High School, and it was kind of new and cutting edge for them to do something like that, and that was amazing.
Yeah.
Like, we had so much fun and we had so much cool opportunity. Quiz question for you, sir. What was the first video that you and I made together in that class?
Was it the football
Yeah.
throw one?
Yeah.
Okay, so the premise for this, for those listening in, was we had to film something and through the magic of editing, make something impossible possible. Mm-hmm. And so my video...
Mine was simply... Do you remember what my part of it was?
Yours was catching the football, but didn't you also do one jumping over the...
Because I had to do one and you had to do one. Mine was... All I did was, like, you threw a tennis ball over my head, and it went on the other side of that, like, 8-foot security fence, and I just go, oh, no. And then I somehow got magical powers and then did, like, a jump over it. Yeah.
Yes. And so mine was, we started on the far end of Fliver Field, mm-hmm. and I said, go long, and you take off running, mm-hmm. and I take, like, the biggest crow hop and just chuck the football, and then through the magic of editing, the ball, like, in the air midfield, the ball going over the scoreboard.
Oh, I caught it, like,
Stadium.
behind, like, Shopko, basically.
Well, no, you caught it at the basketball courts by the middle school. I think you ran into the pole, the basketball pole.
Yeah.
And so it was like I threw the football, like, easily, like, 600 yards or something.
Also, if you want a memory lane joke quick, with coaching girls high school hockey, there was, I don't know if it was, it's just with social media these days, there were some girls that maybe got in a fight over social media or something like that. And I was the old man that said to them, and I said, girls, listen up. Back in my day, we didn't have social media. If you wanted to settle something, you would do it behind Shopko. Because I don't know if you remember, but you'd be in middle school or at high school, and you'd be walking through the halls, and you'd be like, did you hear that Joe and Steve are going to fist fight behind Shopko after school? Like, that's where you went to settle your issues. Was the rumors of fights that were going to happen, by the old broken pallets behind Shopko.
Forget the comments section of TV6. You settle your differences with fisticuffs like a man.
Behind Shopko. Make sure it's behind Shopko. That's where everybody went, because it was close to school, but it was off school property.
Oh, that's amazing. That's a great memory that I completely forgot. I probably blocked it out. But so to circle back a little bit just to the music thing here, we got a little bit off topic there.
Oh, we always do.
So what's some of the music out that's right now that you're listening to that's kind of got you excited, or stuff that you're, like, digging lately?
Oh, wow. Let me think this one up. I go all over the place. I'm the type of guy that people like they're either maybe they rap their country. I talked about my emo days, but I go from being someone that I can listen to folk singer songwriter. I can listen to like a Damien Rice, or I can listen to some of the softer stuff. Matt Nathanson's another artist. Some of the stuff like that, and then I go through indie rock. I really enjoy my indie rock, kind of my alternative rock, and some of those bands. And then I go into metal all the way through into my metal, and really enjoy some music that I'll pull up to a hospital for work to sell medications to a doctor, and I'll forget to turn off some of my screaming metal music, and I see patients looking at me like, what in the world is this guy? It's like, oh, no, never mind. I'm in a 3-piece suit here to talk to the doctor about the best way to help your patients with depression. So, yeah, I know. It's kind of odd. But I don't know, musically, you go through a rut. Almost like with podcasts, you go through waves. Like, are you going to listen to, sometimes you absolutely love something and you want to turn to something else. But I would say, lately, going back to, like, the singer-songwriter stuff, there's this young guy named Dermot Kennedy that is just amazing. I would check him out. Going back to my emo or my punk days, Alkaline Trio is putting out a new album on Friday that
I
I'm
heard that.
absolutely pumped about because Matt took over for Tom DeLonge in Blink-182, so I thought, well, Alkaline Trio's dead with Matt Skiba out of the picture, but they're dropping a new album on Friday that I'm really excited about. It's crazy how there's certain bands that you think would just kind of... that's what Agonizing Audio Hour, sometimes we'll really focus in on some of these bands that just refuse to die. Kind of like, Cheap Trick is still playing nonstop. And bless the hearts of those gentlemen. But fellas, you're in your late 60s and you're touring the country 200 days a year. So, I mean, I don't know. I never got around to... Somebody was like, oh, you need to check out the new Nicki Minaj album. It's like, well, I wouldn't check it out
That was me.
Oh, that was you. Oh, God.
I didn't say check it out. I said I was pleasantly surprised.
I want to say somebody else also told me to listen to it pleasantly. I don't know. When it comes to rap, I look at what we got into, and I just love it so much.
Right.
I love that 90s style of rap, but that's how a lot of people are. It's, back in my day, this was the best, and that was the best. And
well, I'm kind of the same as you. I'm all over the map when I'm listening to music, and to your credit, I've been really broadening my horizons because of your podcast. Because you guys will talk about an album, and
I love how you send me snaps. So, a little for the listeners, Scott and I both got something from our fathers, from Joe and from Forrest, that we both inherited. And Scott and I are obsessed with our yards. So we love a nice, lush, green yard with, if you have time to diamond cut it, go ahead and diamond cut it.
Cut that lawn.
I pay, it's actually called Weed Man. I pay my Weed Man because Weed Man is, it's kind of like, I know in Iron Mountain we called it Bex, but it's a yard service. They come around, they spray. I pay Weed Man $500 a year to come around and spray 6 times. I got to get my fall treatment and got to get my grub control. You don't want to lose your yard of grubs, guys, because I didn't want to pay the Weed Man for my grub control until I started getting yellow spots due to grubs.
I'm glad you specify, because if you were on here talking about paying your Weed Man...
Yeah, but it really is. It's called Weed Man Lawn Service. And then, I'll get a text message that on my smartwatch says Weed Man. And like, hey, I'm stopping by your house tomorrow at 8 a.m. Yeah, for my treatment. But... no, so we got that from our parents, and I send you snaps when I'm done cutting the grass so you can see what my lawn looks like, and you do the same.
Yes.
But you now do it with my Agonizing Audio Hour album. So
yes.
I will get it with Pat Monahan from Train, or I'll get it from Khalees, a little milkshake to the yard.
You'll get it from your boy, Rich.
The Fairbrass Brothers, Right Said Fred. You guys might know Right Said Fred from I'm Too Sexy. We covered their album, and we are trying to get one of the two brothers in that to come on our show sometime. So, not going too well so far.
If any of you out there somehow know...
6 Degrees of Separation, right?
Yeah.
6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon?
Yeah.
If you know Richard or Fred Fairbrass, they live somewhere outside of London. They're bald. They usually wear shirts with holes in them. That's how you can find them. But no, we've done... Yeah, so, talking about that, you're kind of getting into some of those, but...
Yeah, I just love finding these albums that you guys have listened to, even if the albums aren't even all that great.
Oh.
It's just kind of expanding my horizons and checking out different stuff, but...
They're bad. And, the other thing that we discussed, too, is how we've done, like, Right Said Fred. We did a new wave album from the 80s, the band that did You Spin Me Right Round. We did Biz Markie. The lead singer of Train did his own thing. We've done some really questionable acts, but the worst album of them all, and somebody just asked, what's the worst album out of the 12 so far? And oddly enough, it was the newest Bon Jovi album. But there's nothing wrong with Bon Jovi. I love Bon Jovi, but their newest album, they're in their 60s now, 50s or 60s. Every single song sounds the same. And when you try to listen to an album of 13 songs that sound the exact same for a week straight, it makes you question your sanity. So that was by far the worst.
Okay. Well, I have one last question for you, sir.
Yes, sir.
And since you listen to my podcast,
I know what it is.
You know the question.
I know what it is, and I already know the answer, but go ahead.
So, ketchup or gravy on your pasty?
Yeah, and that's just... I am a pasty connoisseur. I am lucky enough to have a grandmother that, with ties to the Cornwall area and in England, and I've been able to go over and visit my cousins multiple times and eat Cornish pasties.
Ooh, so I'm adding another question then to that.
Yeah.
Are pasties better here or over there when you went and had
They're
them?
a little bit different because their meat is different there. England is not known for their meats. If anybody's been to England, England's not known for their food. The pasties are great, and fish and chips are great. But I would say pasties here just because, I'm more used to pasties here. I like the meat better in the pasties here. If you would try to put ketchup on your pasty over there, you would be shunned. You go to Lambeau Field here, you eat a hot dog. When you go to like Wembley, I got to go to see the English national team play Montenegro in a match, a World Cup qualifying match. And instead of hot dogs in the stadium, you get pasties there. But don't order ketchup. It's kind of like you going to a 5-star steakhouse here and ordering ketchup. You will be looked upon badly. Here, my pasty floats in ketchup. I love ketchup. I have an odd obsession with ketchup. But the gravy thing is offensive to me because you don't put gravy on a pasty until I met my wife. And my wife didn't know what a pasty was, but she had heard you could put gravy on them, and my wife enjoys. So she'd be the only one so far that would answer that question with gravy, and I've learned to say that's okay. To each their own. If you want to put gravy on your pasty, that's fine.
The first time I ever had gravy on a pasty...
I've never done it.
...was only like 2 years ago, and you know what? It was up at deer camp, and we had made like a pork roast or something where like the gravy was left over from the roast.
Some nice gravy there.
And so then it was like, hey, I'm going to put this on my pasty instead of ketchup.
Yeah.
And it was, I'm not going to lie, it was kind of a game changer. But I'm still a either or. It depends on the situation or what's available to me at the time.
Oh, I saw, what was that? What's that Andrew Zimmern show?
The
Odd Foods?
Yeah,
or
Odd
whatever?
Foods, or he's got a couple of different like adventure food shows. Yeah.
Well, he did a thing, and he ate a pasty, but he ate it in Minnesota, and he had talked about how you can put ketchup on it or gravy, but he had said gravy is more of a Western United States thing, especially Montana, and I want to say he said the North Dakota, South Dakota is where they really put gravy on their pasties, and then the further east you go, you run into ketchup. So,
interesting.
Yes.
Very interesting. Well, I don't have any more questions for you, Brandon, but I do have to say I know you were nervous about coming on here. You felt like you weren't going to have stuff to talk about or whatever. But
you have all these wonderful people that are doing wonderful things
but
wonderful...
so are you. That's the thing that you've got to realize is, okay, you're not living in the UP, but you know what? You're a Uper that's doing awesome stuff and has done awesome stuff. And that's the only requirement to be on this podcast.
Awesome.
If you're a Uper that is doing awesome things and has done awesome things, and has some cool stories along the way, which obviously you do.
I've got them.
Yeah. So you qualify. You check off every part of my checklist. So you've been a great guest, and I think that this has been a great chat. So thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir. This has been wonderful.
Okay, it's time for the takeaways from my chat with Erks. The first is all about turning negatives into positives. He survived cancer, which is one of the worst things that can happen to someone. But he didn't just survive. He used his experience to help others, which in turn helped him as well. If we could all focus on how to turn the negatives we face into positives, I think we'd be surprised on what we're capable of. My second takeaway from our chat is one that I've also been learning over the 28 years we've known each other. And that is that I realized just how much our friendship has impacted me. Whether it be my taste in music, or how after his cancer battle, he motivated me to raise funds for men's cancer research, which we did together for many years. Or how once he started his podcast, it encouraged me to try and see if I could do this too. And it's those types of examples that lead me to my last takeaway, which is that old saying of, you are the company you keep. I feel strongly that we should surround ourselves with people who have the character and qualities that we aspire to have. In that respect, I would say that I'm in pretty good company. What kind of company are you in? Chat It Up is a bi-weekly podcast about all things Upper Peninsula of Michigan. If you haven't already, please subscribe, rate, and leave me a review. You can also find Chat It Up on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you for listening in. I'm your host, Shooter, reminding you to keep your chin up and your eyes forward.